I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make gluten-free breakfast bars. And they're kind of like a granola bar, but not really. They're like a breakfast bar. Somewhere between a cross of granola bars, cereal bars, and kind of a muffin, kind of, but not really. I guess you could even say kind of a protein bar in a sense. I've got some peanut butter, we've got eggs, I'll have some nuts, and then over here I do have some quinoa that is cooking. And I'm going for about 1 to 1.5 cups of shredded carrots. And I thought maybe 2 wouldn't be enough, but it looks like it is. Get rid of my salad shooter. And a salad shooter really makes fast, easy work of shredding carrots, potatoes, zucchini. So this is one of those recipes that you can change every single time you make it. If you don't like peanut butter, use almond butter or cashew butter or sunflower seed butter. And then I've got about 1 cup of shredded coconut, and this is really finely shredded, unsweetened. I've got about 1 cup of blueberries. Use your favorite berry or any kind of fruit. And it doesn't have to be fresh. You could use frozen that is thawed. And then I've got some pecans here, but you could use whatever your favorite nut is. So I'm just checking on my quinoa here. And that is 1 cup of uncooked quinoa to 2 cups of water. And we want that to be fully cooked and then cooled slightly. My oven is already at 350 because I had toasted my pecans. And then I do have a 9x13 greased with butter. And then I do have 3 eggs here. You could make this recipe without eggs. You could make flax eggs and replace the eggs, or you could use chia seeds. This recipe really is so versatile. And I'm aiming for about 1 cup of chopped pecans. Quinoa is a really good protein for something like this. And if you don't have any quinoa, use millet. Use cooked millet and it would be the same thing. So I call these breakfast bars, but you don't have to eat them for breakfast. These are really good for lunch. These are really good for a mid-morning or mid-afternoon snack. I really like something like this that has a lot of protein in case you can't get a lunch. I know some of us have jobs that are very demanding, and sometimes before you know it, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't had your lunch break yet. I had a request for some kind of nurse's cookies, and I think these will fit that perfectly. Especially in a really high demand job like being a nurse. And I've mentioned before, I've worked in the medical field for most of my adult life. And the medical field, it is not the only demanding job. So this is something you could easily just eat on the go. And that's probably more than 1 cup, but that's just fine. Then I can save the rest of my nuts for something else. And this is all finished. So I'm just going to take it off of the heat and let it cool slightly. And then I can get my other ingredients mixed together. So I'm going to move aside my cutting board and my pecans. And this makes so many. You could have one every day. They freeze really well. So you could make a 9x13, put half of them in the freezer. So in this bowl I've got 3/4 of a cup of my gluten-free flour. You could also use just almond flour if you wanted more of a kind of a protein flour. And then I've got 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And you can change the spices every time you make this recipe. If you like more of one, put it in. If you don't like one, leave it out. So just mix that together. It doesn't take much. So set aside the dry ingredients. So now in my large bowl here, I'm going to start mixing together my 1/2 cup of peanut butter, always use a more natural peanut butter that does not have a lot of extra sugar in it, or any added sugar for that matter. And you could use a crunchy peanut butter or crunchy nut butter, whatever you're using. And then a 1/3 cup of maple syrup. You could also use honey. You could also use coconut sugar. You could use date sugar. I don't have an equivalent of regular sugar because I've never made this with white or brown sugar. And then I've got 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then I'm just going to mix my maple syrup and my peanut butter together before I add in the eggs. And natural peanut butter always looks a little more chunky than a smooth, creamy, really full of sugar peanut butter. So 3 eggs in there, give it a really good mix. I'm going to switch to my spatula to mix in the rest of the ingredients. This really is kind of a 1 bowl wonder and a 1 pan wonder. Well, almost. You do have to cook the quinoa, then you have a cookie sheet for the nuts, and I've got like 6 different bowls going on. So it might be a 1 bowl wonder for you. And if you're using some kind of egg replacement like a flax egg or chia seeds, you don't have to worry about stirring in your quinoa if it's a little bit warm. I'm waiting until the very end so my quinoa has had a chance to cool off so it doesn't cook my eggs before I'm ready for them to. So I'm just going to start adding in all of my ingredients. I've got my carrots, and you can tell I'm not even really measuring, I'm just kind of eyeballing. And I am going to stir my carrots around just to get them coated, and then I'll add in my flour next. So my flour and my spices. And then I'm going to add in my coconut, my blueberries, and there's my pecans. And then just give everything a really good stir. Maybe you've never had carrots and blueberries together before. They really are delicious together. So once you've got this all mixed together, we can start stirring in our cooked quinoa. And I'm using kind of a multicolored quinoa today. And then just dump it in, and I'm going to stir it together very quickly. It is still pretty hot. And then just get in here and give it a really good stir. Once you've got that all mixed together, bring over your 9x13 and just pour it in. And when you're gluten-free, having something like this with you is really helpful. Say you're going to a dinner party and you think there might be some options that you can have, and you get there and there isn't. Or you don't feel comfortable eating. Then you've got this. It's not dinner, but it will get you through till you can get home. And I don't know about you, but that's something that I always think about. You never really know. And it isn't anybody else's fault. Sometimes people do their best to make sure there's something that you can eat, and something gets missed. It happens. So it's always good to have something like this with you, just in case. Then you're not starving to death later, and then you get hangry like me. So once you've got this all spread in your pan, it will go in the oven 25 to 35 minutes. So you want to cook these until they're golden brown and it feels firm to the touch. It is a little puffed up right now from being in the oven. It will sink down a little bit. So we just want to cool this off completely. I suppose you could serve it warm or eat it warm, and then it would be kind of like an oatmeal breakfast in a bar form. It smells really good. The cinnamon is coming through, something about warm blueberries, and of course the carrots. It almost kind of looks like carrot cake a little bit. But I usually wait for them to cool off completely. They hold their shape better and they're easier to cut. My breakfast bars are completely cooled off. And they did sink down a little bit, but they still look about the same as they did when they first came out of the oven. Careful of those blueberries in there. And I usually cut these in 12 pieces. You could go bigger or smaller depending on what you like to do. And they hold their shape so well. They really are just kind of a solid breakfast bar. Let's move that aside. So nothing fancy at all. I mean, it looks the same, it looks almost the same as it did going in as it does when it's finished. And then they are still soft, but you'll want to keep these in the fridge. And then they do firm up a little bit more after having been in the fridge. But they really do hold their shape well. It's surprising to me how much the blueberry flavor comes through. But it really is good. And it's not really sweet at all. It has just the right amount. Carrots add a little bit of sweetness. Blueberries add a little bit of tartness. And then just that little bit of maple syrup. And the peanut butter. Sometimes peanut butter can be overpowering, but it really doesn't have a strong peanut butter flavor. And the texture is really good too. The quinoa, because it's cooked and then of course it's baked, it really does have a kind of a chewy, soft texture. And so much protein is in here. Quinoa has a lot of protein. The peanut butter has protein. There's a little bit of crunch from the pecans. And I'll say it again, you can change it every single time you make it. Try it with different fruits. Try it with different nuts. It really is the perfect breakfast bar on the go. And you don't even have to make this in a 9x13. You can make this in a muffin pan. Your baking time might change a little bit if you make these into muffins. You don't want to overcook them, but then you'd have it perfectly portioned. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. Let me know what kind of fruit you decide to put in your breakfast bars. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.